Most people assume that the biggest financial mistake in today's world has something to do with not earning enough money, or not having access to the right opportunities, or maybe simply not understanding how investing works. But when you actually look at how people behave with money in 2026, a very different pattern starts to appear. The real issue is not a lack of information anymore. In fact, we are living in a time where financial knowledge is more accessible than at any other point in history. You can learn how markets work, how investing functions, how businesses grow, and how wealth is built within minutes. The problem is not access. The problem is how people respond to what they know. The biggest money mistake today is something far more subtle and far more damaging over time. It is the consistent prioritization of short-term outcomes over long-term behavior. In simpler terms, people are still trying to make fast money in a process that only rewards patience. And even though this has always been true in theory, in 2026 it has become more obvious than ever because the entire environment around money has shifted towards speed, urgency, and instant gratification. Everything today moves quickly. News spreads instantly. Market movements are visible in real time. Social media is filled with people showcasing sudden success. And financial narratives are constantly shaped around rapid outcomes. Someone turns a small amount of money into a large gain in a short period and it spreads everywhere. Someone launches a project and gains attention quickly and it looks like effortless success. What is not visible is the long period of repetition, failure, adjustment, and patience that preceded those moments. But because people only see the outcome, not the process, their expectations begin to change without them even noticing. And this is where the mistake begins. When people internalize the idea that financial success is supposed to be fast, they begin to behave differently. Instead of following a consistent plan, they start reacting to whatever seems most promising at the moment. They jump from one idea to another, from one investment to another, from one strategy to another, constantly searching for something that will produce immediate results. But what they are really doing, without realizing it, is abandoning the very principle that actually builds wealth over time, which is consistency. Wealth is not created through constant change. It is created through repetition, and repetition only works when behavior is stable over time. The problem is that stability does not feel rewarding in the short term. When you do something today and nothing visibly changes tomorrow, it feels as if nothing is happening. And because of that feeling, most people assume the action itself is not effective. But in reality, most financial progress is invisible in the early stages. It builds slowly, almost quietly, until it reaches a point where the results become obvious. This is where the difference between wealthy investors and everyone else becomes extremely clear. Wealthy investors are not necessarily smarter in the way people assume. They are not constantly predicting markets with perfect accuracy, and they are not relying on complex strategies that others cannot understand. Instead, they have a very different relationship with time. They accept that results unfold slowly, and because of that, they remove the pressure of needing immediate feedback from every decision they make. Rather than trying to be right all the time, they focus on staying consistent over time. They build systems that operate regardless of short-term conditions. These systems are not designed to produce excitement, they are designed to produce reliability. Regular contributions, diversified exposure, long-term holding, and emotional discipline during volatility are not sophisticated secrets. They are simple principles, but the power comes from how long they are applied, not how complex they are. The irony is that most people already understand these ideas at a surface level. Almost everyone has heard that investing should be long-term, that diversification reduces risk, and that emotional decisions often lead to poor outcomes. The gap is not knowledge, the gap is execution over time. Many people can follow a good strategy for a short period, but very few can maintain it when conditions become uncomfortable or when progress feels slow. And because financial environments are naturally unpredictable in the short term, discomfort is not an exception, it is part of the process. When people experience that discomfort, they often interpret it as a signal that something is wrong. If the market drops, they assume their approach is failing. If nothing seems to be happening for a while, they assume they need to change direction. If another opportunity looks more exciting, they assume they are missing out. And so the cycle continues. Constant adjustment replaces consistency, and short-term reaction replaces long-term planning. What is important to understand is that this behavior does not just slow progress, it often prevents progress entirely. Because wealth building relies heavily on time and repetition, constantly interrupting the process resets momentum. Every time someone abandons a strategy too early, they lose the compounding effect that would have developed if they had simply stayed consistent. And compounding is not just a mathematical concept, it is a behavioral one. It requires time to work, and time requires patience. This is why simplicity plays such a critical role in long-term investing success. Simple systems are easier to maintain, and anything that is easier to maintain is more likely to be followed consistently. The more complex a strategy becomes, the more room there is for hesitation, doubt, and inconsistency. And inconsistency is the real enemy of long-term wealth creation. Not volatility, not market cycles, not economic uncertainty, but inconsistency in behavior. When you look at it from this perspective, investing stops being about finding the perfect strategy or making the perfect decision. It becomes about building a structure that can survive your own emotions over time, because markets will always fluctuate, conditions will always change, and uncertainty will always exist. The only variable that you can actually control is your behavior, and that brings us back to the core issue. The biggest money mistake in 2026 is not a technical error, it is a mindset error. It is the belief that success should be fast, and that constant action leads to better outcomes. In reality, it is often the opposite. The more frequently people change direction, the less stable their results become, and the more they try to optimize short-term performance, the more they disconnect from long-term growth. When you remove the expectation of immediate results, something important happens. Decision-making becomes calmer, actions become more intentional, and the pressure to constantly evaluate performance disappears. Instead of asking whether something is working right now, the focus shifts to whether the process is still intact. And as long as the process is intact, time becomes the most important variable working in your favor. That is the fundamental difference. Wealthy investors are not focused on predicting what will happen next. They are focused on participating consistently in a process that has historically worked over long periods of time. They are not trying to win every moment. They are trying to stay in the game long enough for time to do its work. And when you understand that, investing becomes significantly less complicated. Not easier in the sense that outcomes are guaranteed, but simpler in the sense that the role of the investor becomes clearer. You are not there to constantly react. You are there to stay consistent. You are not there to predict every movement. You are there to maintain participation over time. So when we talk about the biggest money mistake people are making in 2026, it is not something hidden or technical. It is visible in everyday behavior. It is the constant switching, the emotional reactions, the desire for speed, and the inability to stay committed when results are not immediately visible. And the solution is not more information, it is a shift in perspective. Because once you understand that wealth is not built in moments but in repetition, the entire approach to money changes. You stop chasing outcomes and start focusing on behavior. And over time, that is what separates those who build lasting wealth from those who constantly feel like they are starting over. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing. I will post more videos like this. If you have any questions, drop them below. I read every single one.